AgriTalk is brought to you by Poet. Every day, Poet partners with family farms to create innovative bioproducts that cultivate communities and grow local economies. Learn more at poet.com. There is plenty to think about ahead of the elections that are just 3 weeks from today. The budget deficits, a huge issue for many voters. We'll take a look at projected deficits under Harris and Trump. And drought has set into the middle of the country. Let's take a look at why and how long it might last.
Live at long last via Farm Journal broadcast, this is AgriTalk. This morning we begin with a conversation with John Homenuk from Empire Weather. Then it's Paul Neiffer, the Farm CPA. I'm the handsome newsman Davis Michelson. Now here's the host of AgriTalk, Chip Lorre.
We are warming up nicely here in Northeast Iowa. Warming
Are
up
you?
Oh, maybe it's not nicely. Heading for a high of just 55, but we were down. We recorded our first freezing temperature of the fall here in just outside the bunker here in Northeast Iowa, Davis. 31 degrees. 31 degrees for low. We're up to 42 already, though.
Wow.
Feels like a heat wave.
Look at you go. We've got 48 degrees, and my phone weather phone?
Yeah.
Weather phone. Just sent me a freeze warning.
Yeah.
These conditions are expected by 1 a.m. Central Time, Wednesday, October 16. Looks like we got a freeze coming overnight, brother.
Yeah. And that reminds me, one of the last things Mrs. Flory said as she was heading out the door this morning was, hey, don't forget to pull the blankets off the flowers.
Uh-oh.
Maybe, yeah, I've
You need me
so
to cover
far
for you for
neglected-
2 to 3 minutes here?
I have so far neglected that responsibility. I'm going to have to go out and do that here before too long. Welcome to AgriTalk. I'm Chip. That is Davis. Glad that you are with us. So we're going to talk more about weather today. John Homenuk from Empire Weather. The ENSO or the ENSO status, or is it El Nino, La Nina, or La Nada? What are we dealing with right now, and what is going to be the influence of that ENSO status on our weather going forward? We'll find out from John coming up here in a little bit. And, of course, that's going to have an impact on the weather patterns down in South America, too. So we've got a lot to dig into with John. And then Paul Neiffer's coming on here today. Paul scared me the other day with with his Farm CPA report that say, hey, deadline's coming up October 15. I'm like, dude, another tax deadline? What are we? Well, it's for those of you that filed for extensions. This is the final deadline of the year, I believe, on those extensions. So we'll find out from Paul exactly what's going on there, and which tax plan would result in the biggest deficit. Is it the Harris tax plan or the Trump tax plan, and why? And why? I mean, is it actual costs? Are either one of them working lower spending into their budgets for the year ahead or the years ahead? I kind of doubt that, but we'll take a look at it with Neiffer coming up here in just a bit. All right, man, you got some news for us?
I sure do. I'll start with the weather.
Okay.
Cooler temperatures are forecast for the Midwest and portions of the eastern United States early this week as a cold front progresses through. Some light snow accumulations may be possible in parts of the upper Midwest. Central Appalachians and northeast gusty winds will bring elevated fire weather conditions in southern Kansas, southwest Missouri, and Oklahoma Tuesday. Any snowflakes out of the deal there, Chip? So probably pretty dry, eh?
Oh, yeah.
You see any snowflakes, nothing?
Here's the deal. Rain, very light rain was showing up on radar over us just last night. There was no rain out there. It's just, it's all, yeah, I hate to say it this way, but it's too dry to rain with those weak little systems.
We need to get a weather guy in here, don't we?
We do.
It's too dry to rain. That's the best we can come up with. And it makes a ton of sense to me, too.
It makes
well
a ton
said,
of
sir.
sense.
A weak La Nina is forecast to develop before winter, bringing warmer than normal temperatures across the southern United States and much of the east. This could result in wetter winter storms in these regions rather than snowier conditions.
Okay, we'll talk to John about it. Yep.
We will. Private exporters report the following daily sales activity: 131,000 metric tons of soybeans for delivery to China during the 24-25 marketing year,
Okay.
and 120,000 metric tons of soft red winter wheat for delivery to Mexico. That's also for the 24-25 marketing year, Chip.
It is great to see that wheat sale, no question about it. And it's almost as good as getting a bean sale to China announced. So it's good news all the way around, and the markets are failing to respond to it.
Well, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller emphasized a cautious approach to future rate cuts, citing strong labor market data and disappointing inflation figures. Speaking at Stanford's Hoover Institution, Waller suggested moving monetary policy toward a neutral stance at a, quote, deliberate pace. The International Energy Agency further cut its global oil demand growth forecast for this year, citing weakness in China, and said the market was heading for a sizable surplus in 2025 in the absence of a major supply disruption. OPEC cut its global oil demand growth forecast for 2024 by 106,000 barrels per day, marking the third consecutive downgrade as fuel consumption slows. Chip, this is an interesting story here.
Yeah, absolutely. WTI is getting smoked today.
Yeah.
I mean, the November contract is down like $3.75 to just above $70 a barrel. It's a tough day for the energies.
Well, Chip, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has reaffirmed the country's ban on the planting and consumption of genetically modified white corn, emphasizing the commitment to food sovereignty. The Mexican Secretary of Agriculture reiterated that no transgenic white corn will be produced or consumed in Mexico.
Yeah, or consumed. That's what makes it an effective ban on imports of GMO white corn. So this is an issue that we kind of thought would disappear with Sheinbaum, but it is not.
Well, Donald Trump on a Sunday news show expressed his intention to renegotiate the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement if he's elected president in 2024. And I think the timing kind of works out for a reevaluation of the agreement itself in 26, if I'm not mistaken, Chip.
Yeah, I believe that is correct. Yes, and it'll be interesting to see which points he renegotiates since his team negotiated the current agreement.
Yeah. Well, Mexican Rail Consortium, Ferromex, and U.S. Railroad Company Union Pacific Corp. said they have stopped issuing permits for some grain rail shipments moving through Eagle Pass, Texas, after a recent train derailment in Mexico closed the track. The halt, just a temporary measure. Chip, through the first 9 months of the year, China imported 4.94 million metric tons of meat products. That's down 13.5% from the same period last year. And finally here, Dr. Bart Fisher, co-director of the Ag and Food Policy Center at Texas A&M, has suggested a potential disaster aid package in response to Hurricane Helene could include commodity payments to farmers. The proposal comes as Southern lawmakers are calling for disaster assistance legislation following the hurricane's devastation. Chip?
Yeah, that's another thing that we can ask Paul Neiffer about and get his opinion on it. And that last news item that you've got there, Davis, let's save that for segment 4, okay? We'll
a fun
keep that
one.
We'll keep that as a bit of a surprise. We're talking weather with John Homenuk from Empire Weather next here on AgriTalk.
At Poet, we are proud to support rural communities and grow local economies across the heartland. Proud to create new market opportunities for farmers. Proud to process local grain at our bioprocessing facilities. Every day, Poet is partnering with family farms to create innovative bioproducts that are changing the world, ensuring that rural farm families can continue to do what they love for generations to come. Learn more at poet.com.
AgriTalk is brought to you by Atticus, providing battle-tested chemistries you know and trust.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad that you are with us on this Tuesday morning. I want to talk weather. Every now and then we need to get a big dose of what is going on in the world of weather. And here to help us do that is John Homenuk. He is with Empire Weather Consulting. Joins us right now. John, it's great to talk to you again. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys? Great to be here.
Yeah, good. We're good, except we're dry, man. September
and
was
also cold.
Yeah, and we got chilly overnight. Yeah, September was the driest on record for some spots in the middle of the country. October has been a bust. What shut the rain out of the middle of the country? Well, I guess that was a tough question, Davis.
Yeah. Maybe somebody doesn't want us to know.
Can you guys hear me okay?
There you are. There you are.
Oh,
now
okay,
we got
good.
you, John. So what shut the
now,
rain out of the middle of the country? Huh.
Wow, how do you like that?
Yeah, we're not hearing you now, John, if you can hear us. Are you there?
You guys got me?
Yeah, we do now, but the problem is every time you start to answer a question, I think you disappear on us.
It's like the universe doesn't want me to say anything.
Yeah, I'll let you jump into it. What's shutting the rain out of the middle of the country?
Yeah, listen, we've had this ridge in place that has dried things out for the last several weeks, and more importantly, the moisture has been shunted away. The ridge has set up, and we're lucky it didn't do it in the summer, right? I feel like that was a fear for a while.
Yeah. Darn it! We're gonna have to do something else to get John on here. Something that's going to be a little more consistent in the message there. John, work with Big Apple Joe there, and we'll try to get your signal straightened out here. Like I said, Davis, it was record dry in some areas, and one of the reasons that I can say that is because some areas of the upper Midwest got nothing. Absolutely nothing in the month of September. So I don't know what's any drier than zero rain. And that did happen for some locations. And here we are in October, and we are looking at crunchy ground out here in many spots. It's one of the reasons that we've been, warning about doing everything that you can to lower your fire risk out there, and make sure that things are moving along nicely. So, what have you gotten for rain down there?
Zilch, zero, goose egg, and it is dry. I was just trying to think in my head because I know we talked about it on the air. I'm trying to remember when's the last time I mowed the lawn.
Yeah,
and I honestly don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, All right. Well, let's find out if we're going to get any rain here yet this fall. I think we've got John back. Let's go ahead and bring him in. How you doing, John?
Can you guys hear me now?
There you are. There you are. You sound a whole lot better. What has shut the rain out of the middle of the country?
Testing.
There you go.
I don't hear you guys at all, if that's the case.
Oh, no.
Try again.
Oh, boy. All right, here we go.
We're striking out in every which way.
There we go.
Yeah, have we got you now, John?
You've got me. We did it.
Okay. All right.
We did it. All right, let's get right into it. So just a quick overview so we can stay on track is just we've had this ridge in place since really September, and we're fortunate it didn't happen in late July and August, which was a fear for a while. And it didn't happen then. It happened in the fall. So we've had this dry ridge in place, and even when we get these cold shots, the moisture that doesn't come back up first. So we just get these cold fronts, these air masses drop in, and then the ridge comes back and we're dry again. So we've kind of been in this really, really poor cycle for moisture for several weeks.
Right. Okay. So talk to me about the ENSO status and what kind of an influence that is having on the weather patterns that we're looking at.
Yeah, so we've very gradually seen, I'm sure you guys remember back in the spring, a lot of the talk was how fast will the La Nina develop, right?
Yeah.
And the faster it developed, the more the risk was that we'd get dry. And so it was a fortunate happening through the spring and summer because the La Nina stayed very weak. It was almost neutral, and it never really took hold of the pattern. Recently, it's taken a little bit more hold, and so it's not a coincidence that we've seen things dry out a bit. As we go into the winter, the thought process is it will remain weak, but it'll oscillate up and down a bit. We're not expecting a strong La Nina by any stretch, but we are expecting some occasional La Nina conditions to develop throughout the fall and the winter as well.
Okay, so if it is not a strong La Nina, is that going to allow for a pattern change yet this fall?
I think it will, but it will probably be later in the fall. So most of the indications we have right now are that we'll start getting some moisture back into the forecast very gradually as we move into November. For instance, late this weekend and early next week, we have a moisture opportunity coming into the plains. So a low pressure system spreads out of the Intermountain West into the foothills and eventually brings some moisture to places like the Texas Panhandle, Kansas, and Nebraska. So that'll be the first system to come out, and there might even be some scattered showers across parts of the Midwest early next week. It's not a lot, but it's something, And as we get deeper into November, the thought process is we'll very gradually start working back to a pattern that has a bit more moisture. So it'll be a slow go of it, but the feeling is that we're through the worst of the dryness now, and we'll start working back gradually into a more normal pattern.
All right. So by the time we get to spring of 2025, get to the end of winter 24-25, it is what kind of a pattern are you looking for, John?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think is going to take another month or two to really answer. There's some indication already on models that we're going to split up again. There's a bifurcation on the models where they split. So some of them stay near neutral, so not La Nina or El Nino, and some of them start actually sending us back into El Nino by spring and summer of next year. So it's a very, very uncertain time right now. I think we need to get through the next couple of months before we really have an inclination as to where it's going to go next year.
All right. Very good. And the reason that I ask is because it's kind of common to hear people say, listen, droughts don't start in the year that they happen. They start in the fall before. And I think there's more than a few producers out there that are concerned that this drought that we've got in the middle of the country is going to continue on into the spring of next year. That's the reason for asking.
Definitely. No, and I think it's a legitimate concern. I will say this, and this is something to keep in all of our minds moving forward as the forecasts become a bit more clear, is if we do transition back towards an El Nino, that should be generally viewed as a good thing. That would reintroduce some more moisture. If we stay neutral or we stay weak La Nina into the spring, then I think those lingering drought concerns could make their way into the growing season in 2025.
Okay. All right. What does all of this mean for the South American growing season, Brazil and Argentina?
Yeah, it's complex down there as well, but I think for a while we were looking at the possibility of a moderate or strong La Nina. And that means two things globally, that very strong correlation. Number one, it means the southern plains gets really dry and warm. And number two, it means that the growing season is dry and warm in southern Brazil and northern Argentina. But we've avoided that strong La Nina. We've avoided even a moderate La Nina. So instead, we're kind of in this weak La Nina scenario. And what tends to happen down there in South America is you get a little bit of a mixed bag. So it was a slow start over the last couple of weeks, but now we're seeing a pattern change across central Brazil from essentially Mato Grosso southward, where there's moisture coming into the forecast over the next several weeks. And the same can be said for northern Argentina. So if you look at the next 15 to 30 days, the moisture forecast is actually pretty solid. They have some ground to make up given how dry it was before, But I think these weak La Niñas tend to be okay in those regions. It's not a constant moisture hose, but it definitely is a kind of pattern that there will be some moisture around. And I think they've avoided the worst case scenario, which would have been a really strong La Niña developing.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds pretty favorable for growers down there, John.
Yeah, so far.
Yep.
It's a long season. I always say, especially in South America, you have to err on the side of caution. But I think in terms of a start, it looks pretty good. We can lean back in our chair just a little bit for those.
Okay. All right, John, thank you for dealing with the difficulties that we had there at the start. I apologize for that, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Cheers, guys.
John
Thanks so much for having me on.
Empire Weather.
Time for Markets Now with the experts from Pro Farmer.
And our usual guest here, Brian Grady, is out of the office this morning. Chip Flory joins us now. Buddy, pressure across everything pretty much except for the soybean oil. Dial us in on the feeder cattle, would you? Big losses there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's big losses in the feeder cattle market. And the thing is, you wouldn't expect that with the losses that we've got going in the corn market. You would expect just the opposite. But I think, Davis, it's a generally defensive day happening in the commodity world. We've got the dollar is actually trading under a little bit of pressure here. You would think that would take some pressure off of the commodity world, but it's just a tough day all the way around. And a lot of it, I think, has got to come around to what is happening in the energy trade. November WTI crude oil futures are now under $70 a barrel, down $3.86. The surprising thing is that soybean oil is actually trading higher on the day, with soybean meal and beans lower. So it is just a generally defensive day in the commodity world.
Down a little better than a nickel in most corn contracts. I'm looking at that December corn at 403, buddy. 3 handle ain't far off.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We are getting down there to some support levels that if we don't hold, they're going to open up, those markets will open up some serious downside risk. It's happening in December corn. We're knocking on the door there. 397 is the actual support level. It's happening in November beans too.
That's Chip Flory on Markets Now.
At Poet, we are proud to support rural communities and grow local economies across the heartland. Proud to create new market opportunities for farmers. Proud to process local grain at our bioprocessing facilities. Every day, Poet is partnering with family farms to create innovative bioproducts that are changing the world, ensuring that rural farm families can continue to do what they love for generations to come. Learn more at poet.com.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors.
AgriTalk is brought to you by the Mighty Micro from Mosaic Micro Essentials. We put more in so you can get more out. Visit microessentials.com to learn more about getting more.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad you're with us. Okay. Boy, there is a lot to think about between now and the elections. There's a lot happening in the world of accounting and business management that we need to talk about with Paul Neiffer, Farm CPA. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing great. We still have 80-degree weather here, but I think by the end of the week, it'll turn around.
All right. So 80-degree weather here being where?
Yeah, I'm in Colorado. I'm at home for at least till tomorrow.
Yeah. that sounds like your travel schedule to me. Yeah. Home at least until tomorrow.
Yeah. I go to Deadwood tomorrow for a meeting. So.
All right. October 15. We can hit this pretty quickly, I think, but it's an important day for some taxpayers out there. Explain that.
Yeah, so most farmers typically file by April 15th. A lot of them file by March 1st. But for those farmers that maybe have a little bit more complicated situation, today is actually the deadline for the extended due date for individual returns. So any farmer out there that hasn't filed their return by today, if they go into tomorrow, they are technically at that point going to be a late filer. And that penalty starting tomorrow is, 5% every month that they're late. Now that is based on the tax owed. So if they don't owe any tax, they're not going to get hit with a penalty. But again, today is that last deadline. I got my return done like 2 weeks ago, so I'm ahead of schedule.
Very good. Good for you. There's some other deadlines coming up, and this one, I will admit, we talked about this earlier this year.
Yeah.
Paul, and it has slipped my mind until I saw it in your notes. The beneficial ownership information reporting is due.
Yeah,
What's
that's
the
due by.
situation?
Yeah, so there was a circuit court in northern Alabama that had ruled it unconstitutional. Well, it finally got appealed to the 11th Circuit, and they heard that appeal last month. And based on my reading of what the questions were that were asked by the judge, I don't think it's going to be ruled unconstitutional. I think the 11th Circuit's going to overturn that ruling, which then means it's going to go to the Supreme Court, but likely it's not going to be heard or anything is not going to be issued before the end of the year. So for those farmers out there that have any type of entity where they have to file with the Secretary of State, like an LLC, a corporation, et cetera, they have until December 31 to actually go online. It's at fincin.gov. So you go online, you fill out the report. It's actually a fairly easy report, Chip, to fill out, but you do have to upload a copy of your driver's license. So for a lot of farmers out there, they're not really looking forward to doing that. But if you don't do it, penalties $500 a day that you're late for each entity, up to a maximum of $10,000 per entity. So if you have 5 entities, that could be a $50,000 penalty.
Yeah, and nobody wants to deal with that.
No.
What exactly is this information for?
Well, I think they're taking a $50,000 hammer to correct a $100 problem. What the reason they came up with it is, you have these Russian oligarchs or Chinese people that are buying assets in the U.S., such as a penthouse in New York or farmland. They're using a single member LLC, so they don't have to report to the government who actually owns that property. Also, they're concerned about money laundering because it's very easy to use an entity to launder money. So what they're doing is they created this beneficial ownership reporting scheme in order to try to help them solve that problem. Now, 95% of the entities out there that farmers deal with, the IRS already has most of this information. They know who the person is, what the ownership percentages are. So, this is just overkill, but it is the law. And again, I don't think it's going to be ruled unconstitutional.
Okay. All right. Keep us up to speed on that one, Paul, because as we get closer to the end of the year, we need to make sure that people know what is required.
And I think the other important thing is most CPAs who typically the farmer would go to a CPA such as myself to have them fill out this report. I'm going to say 80% of the CPAs out there are not going to do this report for you because there's concern about it being practicing law. Also, their malpractice insurance companies have told them, we don't want you preparing this. So the farmer himself or herself is likely going to need to prepare it. Now, I've done about 20 or 30 of these for my own type of entities that I happen to be involved in. It's a fairly easy report, but don't be doing it on December 28th or 29th. Might as well get it done now.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Talk to me about and compare the Trump and Harris tax plans. I mean, we unfortunately assume that there's going to be that the budget is going to be working with a deficit. Which plan could result in the biggest deficit?
Yeah, so right now, based on some projections, again, this is from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. They did a report about a week ago on this. If you looked at all the tax cuts that Harris is proposing, the midpoint's about a $7 billion, over 10 years, it's $7 trillion of additional increase to the deficit. If all of President Trump's policies were to go through, it would increase the deficit by about 10 trillion. So there's about a 3 trillion excess for Trump. Now, there's two key items that Trump could eliminate, and that would bring it back to about where Harris is at. He wanted to exempt overtime income from taxes. That's about 2 trillion over 10 years. And then he wanted to end the taxation of Social Security benefits. That's about 1.3 trillion. So if he just simply eliminated those two provisions, they would increase the deficit by about the same amount. So, and again, we have to remember that, the presidents don't set tax policy.
Right.
That's done by Congress. So we have to remember that, if the House is, let's say the House is Democrat and the Senate is Republican or vice versa, none of these, or most of these proposals are not going to go through.
Right. And they call it a cost, but is it a cost, or is it just projected lower revenues because of lower taxes that are resulting in the bigger deficit?
Yeah. So that's what we have to look at. Is you're correct. Yeah. It's a projection of lower revenues. Now, can some of those lower revenues then be offset with additional income that comes in because we have additional growth in the economy, which then increases tax revenue? That's a possibility. So, so it's hard to know. But, again, both candidates have come out with a lot of tax benefits that, if they really are concerned about the deficit, they're not going to really have them go through.
Exactly. And I mean, hey, Paul, they could offset some of these lower revenues with lower spending too, right?
Well, now Chip, you and I, the chance of that happening. Now, Iowa State's got a chance of hitting or being in the national playoff this year, so there is a chance, but the chance of them cutting spending is even lower than that. So, who knows what it might be?
Oh, love it. Okay.
Now, the one thing I think, Chip, we do need to reinforce that if Harris was to get elected and Congress went along with it, there are some nasty changes coming for farmers potentially. They really want to reduce the ability to take advantage of a 1031 exchange. That allows farmers to sell land, let's say 20 miles away, to buy the quarter section the next door. They don't have to pay taxes on that. They get to defer that gain. President Harris, Vice President Harris, well, maybe we can call her President Harris right now, who knows, would like to reduce that ability. That would cap it at a $1 million gain that can be deferred. Also, remember, everybody kept talking about eliminating the step up in basis. No, they don't want to eliminate it. They want you to pay a tax to allow you to get a step up in basis. So that's back on the table. And then they also want to really apply self-employment tax or net investment income tax to all the income for farmers out there above a certain level. So those are some nasty things that is not in President Trump's plan, but is in Vice President Harris's plan. So that's something we have to be worried about.
Okay. All right. Very quickly. Only got about a minute left, but I got to ask you, do you think there's going to be a disaster aid package this fall?
Well, by fall, I think technically by the time it passes, it'll be winter, but it'll be sometime in 2024. I think during the lame duck session, sometime right after the election, November 5th, something between November 5th and December 31st. Yes, it'll be about $20 billion. I'm just hoping they don't come up with some stupid progressive payment plan like they did on the 22 ERP.
Yeah, the what kind of a payment plan would you favor here on this?
Well, I think it should be essentially similar to the 21 and the 22. That's what Congress intended. It worked fairly well. Yes, it didn't cover all the aid, but everybody was treated exactly the same, and that's the way it should be, instead of this way of making winners and losers, primarily losers, which is what happened with the ERP 2022.
Right. Gotcha. Neiffer, you're the best, man. Thank you so much for coming on and bringing some perspective to these important issues. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Chip.
You bet. Paul Neiffer, Farm CPA. Look for the Farm CPA report out there. Google that, and you can get more information from Paul on a regular basis there. All right, Davis and I will be right back to wrap up this morning's AgriTalk.
At Poet, we are proud to support rural communities and grow local economies across the heartland. Proud to create new market opportunities for farmers. Proud to process local grain at our bioprocessing facilities. Every day, Poet is partnering with family farms to create innovative bioproducts that are changing the world, ensuring that rural farm families can continue to do what they love for generations to come. Learn more at poet.com.
AgriTalk is brought to you by Frontier Precision Agriculture. Farming success demands the best efficiencies and smart decision-making. Get your field intelligence at frontierprecision.com/ag. Welcome back to AgriTalk, everybody. Your pal, Davis Michelson, here along with Chip Flory. A couple good conversations there.
Yeah, very good.
Sounds like we're gonna stay dry for a little bit, though. At least a little while longer.
But there is better chances for precipitation coming in the second half of the month, and as we get closer to November, and then we just need to, it's on one hand, it's kind of like, well, frustrating that we don't have a better handle on what exactly is going to happen as the ENSO continues to change, but on the other hand, it's refreshing to get that kind of honesty from John to just say, listen, we need another month for this thing to kind of flush out, and give us another month, and we're going to have a better idea on just what the influence of the ENSO status, whether that be La Nada, La Nina, or El Nino trends. It will be interesting. But the bottom line is we're seeing La Nina type weather right now. The thing that bothers me about these forecasts for moisture coming up is they keep moving it back. That target keeps moving further and further back. I hope we catch up to a rain forecast here sooner rather than later for some of these guys. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure the dryness is just transitory, right?
I'm sure it is.
Let's just take a moment and just take that another step further and just harp on you good folks about some fire safety just one more time. A lot of kindling out there. I probably don't need to tell you that. Please be careful. Be aware out there. There was a news story that we didn't get to. I'd like to discuss it with you because I don't know. I watched the video on X. It's about 2.5 minutes. I'm going to read the story here. In a video posted to social media, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has taken a strong stance against current agricultural policies in the United States. Kennedy asserted that America's current agricultural policy is, quote, destroying America's health on every level. He stood outside USDA's building in Washington, D.C. to deliver this message, symbolizing his intention to change the system from within. And, of course, that assumes that Donald Trump would be president at the time, and Kennedy's looking for a cabinet-level position here in which he feels like this issue can and needs to be addressed. Chip?
Make America healthy again.
See, I like that.
Yep, that is the motto of RFK. Here's a couple of things to think about on this, and here's what I thought about. There are a lot of producers out there that when they look at the climate change legislation coming from the left, or they look at some of the efforts to change production practices out there, they roll their eyes and they say, listen, nothing's going to change because we need to have food, and because we need to have adequate food supplies, and because that adequate and safe food supply needs to be affordable. And you know what? They might be exactly right. That could be exactly right. But if that ends up being right, it's not going to come without challenges. And it appears now that it's going to come with challenges from both sides. On the left, going to continue to promote the climate smart farming protocols or projects out there, whatever you want to call it, but climate smart farming. And on the other hand, we've got RFK that says he's going to change the system from within. Talks about in that 2.5 minute video, he talks about corporate farming and how it's all corporate farming now. The small and medium sized producers that are left are getting squeezed out. There's I'm not exactly sure when 95% of the farms out there are family farm operations, how he says that family farms are getting squeezed out, but he does.
Mm-hmm.
And Kennedy asserted that America's current agricultural policy is, quote, destroying America's health on every level. They talk about ultra-processed foods, Davis, and how the ultra-processed foods are creating all kinds of health issues for Americans, whether that be young Americans or older Americans. All I know is that when what farmers produce leave the farm, as far as I can tell, it's pretty much unprocessed and one ingredient.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So how farms are to blame for the quote unquote ultra processed products that are out there is beyond me. It is absolutely beyond me, but nonetheless, they're getting the blame.
And here's the thing. If you ask me, the onus is on the consumer.
Yeah.
If we're going to be free market guys, okay, well, the consumer will tell us what they're willing to pay for. When I go into the grocery store, I walk by a whole section of delicious, fresh, single ingredient produce.
Yep.
And then eventually I start to work my way through the store getting my items, and then I'm confronted with a whole row of potato chips and frozen pre-made meals and all this sort of stuff. Hey, man, I don't know what – I think it falls on the consumer. And to blame the farmer is just short-sighted.
Absolutely.
It upsets me.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. It's short-sighted with some potential long-term consequences.
Yes.
Because number one priority should be food security. And food security means that what is coming off the farm is abundant, is safe, and is affordable.
Yep.
And if you want to change the whole production system out there from what we've got in place right now, with some pretty strong efficiencies, you might be dealing with some issues that you don't want to deal with. All right, come back this afternoon. Darren Fessler, Lakefront Futures here on AgriTalk.